Hello again, or welcome if you're new. I am Marie. I have a 3-year-old boy and we do Montessori homeschooling. So today I thought I would hop on. You can see I'm in my new filming space, my filming corner. It's not decorated, I apologize, but I really wanted to get on and address a question that I get asked all the time, which is how did I prepare myself for homeschooling? If you follow me on Instagram, you'll know that I share a lot about homeschooling. I've kind of documented my experience with my son so far. We started in August, so fairly recently, but we have been doing Montessori at home since he was 10 months old. So, but if you're watching this video, you're probably aware that primary age homeschooling in Montessori is a whole different ballgame than the toddler years. A lot to know, a lot more kind of academic learning and stuff like that. So a little bit more pressure when you're doing it at home. So if it helps, I thought I would kind of walk through it with you, just what I did so I could feel confident. I am planning on making this a 2-part video so that I can also address kind of what I've learned so far and kind of some insights from my attempt at getting started and, settling into homeschooling life. So I'll go ahead and get started, and feel free to leave any questions, comments, anything like that in the comments below, or you can DM me over on Instagram. I'm happy to help, but I'll go ahead and get started. I do have my notes right over there to help keep me on track. So if you see me look over there, that is why. So first thing I wanted to talk about was I got started by researching. If you follow me on Instagram, that's probably not a surprise. I love to research. Learning is kind of my self-care. So I did a lot of research. And I started, honestly, when my son was probably about 10 months old because I always knew I wanted to homeschool him. So I started preparing really early. You do not have to do that, partially because I'm here to give you some of my information that I've learned, but also because 50% of the reason I did that was I just really enjoyed it. So don't feel like you have to do that, but it is important to do some research because you have to know what you're going to be doing, why you're going to be doing it, how you want to do it, and stuff like that. So research is really important. I won't go into detail on the specifics about all these topics in this video because I do plan on doing shorter videos about each of them. So I did one recently about books that I love, and you can check that out. I'll link that in the description box. And that was kind of books that I've acquired and read and that really helped me with my research, figuring out primary age homeschooling. So I did that. I went to the library. I read ebooks online. You can get some of Maria Montessori's books as audiobooks even, and stuff like that. So I did do my research. I tried to figure out exactly how we were going to apply it, and then also why we were applying it, because I didn't want to just mindlessly introduce materials and activities and not really understand what it's doing for him, because a big part of Montessori is also observation of your child. And it doesn't have to be formal, you don't have to keep a notebook or anything, but just really taking time to pay attention every once in a while to make sure they're getting what they're needing. So when you observe, it's good to have that research background, because then you can look at your notes or think about what you watched with your child and say, right, so he's doing this because he's trying to learn that, or he took a long time to do this, or repeated it a bunch of times, and stuff like that. And you'll know from your research, even if it was just one book, even if it was just minimal research, you'll at least have a better idea of why they were doing those things or what you need to do for them. So that is how I started. Then I decided on what space to use in my home. Now, we don't have a huge house. I came from a super small house before this, so it feels big to us, but it's not huge. We do have a spare room upstairs that we had as our playroom. You'll probably see videos on my channel of that. I've got some you might have seen. But we had a playroom while he was a toddler. Lots of activities on shelves and nice pictures on the wall and everything, and it was really fun, and it gave us a place during the week to come up, or during the day I should say, to come upstairs and have a little peaceful area to play. But in the primary years, it's really important, I felt like, to not have things separated throughout the house, work areas, because, or at least not, on a second level of the house, because the old saying of out of sight, out of mind, I tried putting some of his Montessori materials upstairs for maybe a week or so, and he never asked to go up to see them. And I would suggest to go up and do some work, and he was not interested. So it kind of took the fun out of it for him, and it just wasn't being used. And when you buy Montessori materials, they can be kind of expensive. I'll talk about that in a little bit, but I didn't want to just waste these materials that we had. So I decided to move it. I don't have a whole lot of space downstairs, so I had to turn half of our living room into our homeschooling area, which meant rearranging my whole living room and bringing shelves and things down there. It was a lot of work. So that kind of leads me into the next part, which was figuring out how we wanted to arrange it and what shelves to use and stuff like that. So I picked my spot. I was really happy. I'm still really happy that it's on the same level as everything else, because practical life activities we do a lot in Montessori. Those are really important, and we do those in the kitchen or by the washer and dryer or outside or folding clothes in the bedroom and stuff like that. So everything's in the same area, and his materials get used all the time now. So it was definitely worth it to move it to the same spot. Also because I don't like having set kind of work cycle, like schedule, like we have to do it at this time. I did try out a bit of a routine, but I really just want him to feel free to get into it when he feels like it. And to be honest with you, a lot of time is before bed. I think he kind of has a bit of my personality of being a night owl, so he gets really into his activities and deep focusing right before bed. So I don't want to, have to go upstairs and, sit upstairs in the upstairs workroom, late at night when I'm tired. So it's nice that it's in the living room. I can read a book or something while he does his work. And then next would be where I got my shelving. So I looked at local thrift stores. Sorry, I have some bookshelves that we had already. I looked at IKEA and stuff like that. So I try to do it as cheaply as possible. I've seen people use windowsills or shoe racks and stuff like that. So I don't recommend spending a ton of money on the shelving. It is nice to have low shelves so they can reach it, and I had to make sure that worked in our space. We have a lot of windows in our living room, and thankfully the shelves I already had fit just underneath the windowsill, so it worked out. But we don't have as much wall space to hang posters or artwork or things like that. So it is different, and we have to work around it a little bit, but it's a lot better in the long run since he has access to it. Baskets and containers for activities. Thrift store is huge. Dollar store. A lot of little baskets. Now in Montessori, they do recommend having, beauty in the environment and nice quality things that the children want to take care of. So I do try to keep that in mind. But again, homeschooling, you can't always spend a big portion of your budget on fancy baskets and containers. So I try to mix it up. I actually used to weave baskets as a hobby, so I have some baskets that I let him use. And then little containers or glass bowls or things like that. Glass, as long as your child knows how to handle it. And we work with what we have and figure it out. I reuse a lot of containers and things, so that's where we get that. And it kind of leads me on to our next topic, which was figuring out my budget. So this is something that I had to obviously get my husband in on. We are a one-income family, and I stay at home with my son, so we do have a budget, and it's not a very big budget. It's something that we had to figure out what to apply that budget on and things like that, because obviously homeschooling is a big part of our life, but we have other areas of our life that our budget needs to focus on too. So I sat down with my husband, we both came up with a number that we were comfortable with, and then I kind of went to work. I did a lot of research on where to buy materials and what I could DIY myself, and what was worth spending money on. So a big decision for me was to do my budget in bigger chunks as opposed to every single month. I thought we would do a little budget every month, But a lot of the like discount Montessori places like Adina Montessori, they have free shipping if you spend, I think it's like $200. So I couldn't get free shipping if I did it every single month. So instead I went with like a every 3 to 4 month budget. So I could buy a large chunk and get free shipping, which was worth it for me. You might find it easier to just do a small budget every month, or maybe you just buy once a year or something like that. I will say about that though, I mean, honestly, even doing it every few months, it's hard to know what your child's going to need, what their interests are going to be. So just be aware of that. Don't try to plan ahead too much. I know that's a little bit scary because planning ahead kind of equals confidence. But with Montessori, it's all about following the child and, doing what works for them. And you might find yourself skipping materials, or you might find holding off or doing them sooner or something like that. So for me, doing it every few months means that I have to kind of take notes throughout the few months that I'm waiting till we can spend more on what he's interested in and what he's learning. And then I have to just reevaluate every few months. I can't plan it out, because if I did, I might be totally off, in which case I just wasted like $200 on materials that he was, not interested in or not ready for. So that is something that I would recommend. Just as much as you can, go with the flow with your buying. Take a couple weeks before you order to evaluate it. Take notes throughout the time period you're waiting, or go with it, regularly every month or so. Next, I would say would be I determined our resources to buy. I determined where I wanted to buy materials from. So Adina Montessori is the only like Montessori outlet that I've bought from so far, but I have looked at a lot of others. I won't go into detail because I will do a video on that as well. But I bought from them, I bought from Amazon, I bought from Walmart, I bought from the dollar store, I DIY'd stuff, reused things we had in our home. My husband, for example, is going to make us the number rods, and I'll paint them and all of that. So I made sandpaper letters and color tablets. You can see I have DIY videos on those. So I didn't go the route of traditional Montessori outlet stores because they are very expensive. Even Adina Montessori can be expensive. I think the color tablets I got, I probably spent like a couple dollars on them, and you can get them fairly expensively, like I want to say like $35 or something for the whole set. So I do discount. That helps me stretch my budget. I posted on Instagram recently the geometric solids that I bought. I bought for like $9 or a little under $9 on Amazon, a generic version that are a lot smaller. The other ones are pretty big. The geometric solids are like 3D shapes, and I bought little wood ones. They're wood, they're not blue like the traditional ones are, but I can paint them or I can do what I need. And we don't have any younger siblings, so we don't have to worry about mouthing or anything, so the size didn't bother me. So those are kind of some of the ways that I get creative with resources, or figure out how to do it without having to spend a ton of money at a real Montessori outlet store, because even the discount Montessori places can be a little pricey. But that being said, I did put my budget towards like Adina Montessori or somewhere like that, real Montessori materials where I felt appropriate. So I can't, I don't want to DIY all of it. I don't have the resources, the, table saws and stuff like that, to be able to do knob cylinders ourselves or something like that. That's a lot harder to DIY. There are people who do that and it's amazing, but we don't have a woodworking shop in our home, so we can't do that. So something like knob cylinders or the pink tower or something was important for me to buy because I didn't have a good way to DIY it otherwise. So I'm not saying don't spend money on traditional materials, just you have to really decide for yourself what's worth it and where you want to put your money. So that gets me into, I decided on what our sequence of materials would be. So in Montessori, there's not a set curriculum. which can be a little unnerving because traditional school, you're used to like, this is what you need to do every day, this is what you need to do every week, every month, and this is how we learn. Montessori is not like that, which is part of the beauty of Montessori, because you're following the child and putting the learning in their hands. But there is, however, a scope and sequence, so a sequence of materials that you can follow. And even that, I will say, Maria Montessori was very clear on she wanted it to be flexible. So teachers or educators, parents should be careful not to rigidly follow the sequence. That's why it's really hard to find an exact sequence of materials, even in books or on websites and things like that, because there isn't one. There's a rough idea of which one comes first, just logically. So that is something you kind of have to figure out for yourself. Again, I'll do a video on it, but I had to do some research and I looked at different websites for Montessori schools. Some of them give you their sequence they follow. There's a few books I mentioned in my book video that are really helpful, but eventually you have to kind of look at your child and say, what are they ready for right now? Do I picture them being really into this or not? And then kind of go from there. So I got my laptop and typed out a sequence for us. And in that, I included which of those I was going to DIY, like color tablets, sandpaper letters, sandpaper numbers, and what I was going to buy. Before I should say I did that before I really got to work buying materials. So after I did that, after I knew what I was going to spend my money on, I put in our first order for real Montessori materials, plus a few things that I got off of Amazon. And then I bought materials to DIY. So I made the materials that I was going to have. And I really wanted to do that first while we waited for our first order, because I wanted us to have something to start with. I didn't want to just sit with empty shelves, and I didn't want to feel like we didn't have any learning tools. We had still a lot of his puzzles and little activities like that from more toddler years, but when they start to get to the 2.5, 3-year-old age, it really, from my experience, it really seems like their interest just grows and they don't want to do this, same little activities they did when they were toddlers. They want some harder work to really concentrate on. So I wanted to DIY a few things so we had something. So that is what I did next. I DIY'd and I put one of our shelves down in our living room space once I got it rearranged, and we got to work. And it gave me a lot of anxiety. I'm not gonna lie. I felt like we're not doing it yet. We're not homeschooling yet. And I probably beat myself up about it way too much because he was still having fun and we still had things on the shelf. But hindsight. So next, after that, I really tried to include as much practical life and outdoor time and things like that I could to kind of make up for it. I felt like I needed to fill in the gaps a lot. So I started doing things like I did story time every afternoon, and we read a book, and then we made a craft activity based on the book. I will say we do a ton of just like open exploration art, just where he does whatever he wants with all of his materials. But we really like doing projects together, so doing craft time was really fun. I did get burnt out on that pretty fast because I ran out of ideas. But I tried to fill in the gaps until we got our materials. And then once we finally got our first box of materials, which is about the time I started sharing on Instagram, like homeschooling specific things. I'm sorry, my chair is squeaking here. Once we got our big box of materials, that's when I started practicing. So learning how to do a presentation, how I should display the materials on the shelves. My favorite that I've looked at so far, you can find a lot of like how to do a lesson on Pink Tower and stuff like that on YouTube or in books or online. But my favorite resource is a woman named Margaret Homfray, who was an associate of Maria Montessori's. She worked with her in helping develop the infant program and things like that, and they lived together in London for a while towards the end of Maria's life. And she's got a whole series of lectures that she did in California on how to present the materials and the ideas behind them and things like that. So I really enjoyed watching that. It was really fun, and she had a lot of like common sense, like don't display the pink tower all put together, because that means the child will, when they take it apart to build it, they'll build it, and after they've worked really hard adjusting and readjusting to build a pink tower, they're exhausted mentally and physically. So even just carrying the blocks back to the shelf is enough work, but having to do that and restack it again is just a lot to ask. So I really appreciated those videos. So I watched things like that, and then I practiced. I practiced giving lessons, which I will say was very hard because I was really excited about the materials that we had bought, and I really wanted to open them and show them to him, but I wanted to hold off because I wanted to feel like we started off on the right foot. So I practiced, and once I felt comfortable, then I started introducing them little by little and kind of expanding our shelf space as we went, as we needed more. After that, I started looking at different unit studies that he might be interested in. Some have been bigger, some have been smaller. I started doing them with him back, I don't know, in the spring maybe. Things like insects or space or things like that. So I set up a little unit study when he seemed interested, like he's really been into maps lately. So I set up just a little corner of our shelves about stuff about maps or the globe or things like that to kind of go with our geography learning. And then I've been just watching and paying attention. I don't schedule those. We don't say, you know, every month we're going to learn about a different thing, because again, it's really important to be flexible and just follow the child's interests. So rather than saying, I think he would be really interested in learning about butterflies, I wait and I see what kind of things he asks questions about, or what he notices on our walks or in his books and things like that. So our next one we're going to be doing is about the moon and moon phases, because we love going outside every night. We take our dog out to go to the bathroom and we look at the moon or see if we could see it, and he loves to point out the moon and what kind of shadow is on it or something like that. So I thought moon phases would be really fun. So that's what I'm setting up now. I definitely wouldn't have thought of that if I hadn't have paid attention to what he was interested in. So I don't schedule out those things. And then also I focus less on like broad subject coverage. So like making sure we have something for math, something for science, something for reading or writing, or learning to read and write, that kind of thing, and just focus on his interests. So I do have a little bit of things for counting. I've noticed he's gotten into counting a lot more, so I'm going to put more out, but I don't really have a whole like math shelf. I put out puzzles if he seems interested, but then I take him out if he isn't interested. Or I've had language activities out for a long time, but we don't have very many on right now because he's not too interested. He's really interested in getting his language learning from books and talking with us at the moment. So I don't worry too much about broad coverage. I just worry about what he's interested in, and I just keep adjusting it. The Montessori environment is supposed to be a living environment, so it's constantly changing, rearranging, trial and error kind of scientific, experimentation. Maria Montessori was a scientist, so it was very important for her that teachers become like scientists with observation and testing things out and seeing what works for each particular child. So that's how I've been approaching it. And then I am going to do a second video on what I've kind of learned so far from that, or what I wish I did differently from the start. And you can check that one out next. Again, let me know if you have any questions. I hope this was helpful, and I'll see you next time. Bye.